How's it going? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Paul.
And I'm Mark.
So we just had another storm, huh?
Yeah, more
Not much of a storm.
rainfall. Yeah.
Yeah, more rain and wind.
We still, I won't call it bare ground, but it's pretty close to being bare out there.
We're still mild winter.
Yeah, for January 14th. Yeah, I was just telling you on the ride up here, there's 3 deer just down the hill here in the field. So
Yeah, I see a bunch of deer tracks out back.
Yeah.
In the crusty snow, so it must have been this morning.
Yeah, although I did hear, I talked to a gentleman up in towards Fort Kent this morning, and they had all snow out of the storm. They got 8 inches.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, up in Soldier Pond, wall of grass. So
And people want to go skiing and stuff like that, snow sledding. A little bit wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, you probably, the snow sledding, I don't know how the trails would be. Probably the woods roads where they're not plowing would be good.
Yeah.
And I see Mars Hill, the lights were on Mars Hill Saturday.
Yeah, I still can't imagine. You're talking about Mars Hill Mountain. The ski.
Mars Hill Mountain, the ski
I still
ski
can't
resort.
imagine the skiing's
No.
that great.
No. Be a little crusty.
Be icy.
Yeah.
And rocky, I would suspect.
Not for me.
No. All right, so this week, what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about supplemental feeding for deer.
Yeah,
is that winter feeding for deer? Is that?
'Tis the season.
'Tis the season, yeah.
We kind of brought it up.
Yeah.
That trip we did out in the woods there, we were checking on, seeing what the deer were doing. You'd mentioned kind of how a lot of the deer have become conditioned to the supplemental feeding.
I think
and it's become pretty popular.
I think they have, Paul. I should have brought some pictures. I took some pictures in the end of August when we had our first snow.
August?
Excuse me, October.
Okay.
The end of October when we had our...
What?
Yeah,
where were you in August?
That is a little early. When we had our first snow there, it was deer season. And there were like a dozen
sets. Snow in October? Oh, yeah, it was.
Yeah,
it was October.
I think it was October. I think it was before... It was the first Monday of...
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think it was the end of October.
Yep.
Anyway, on that trail that we hunt around, there were probably a dozen sets of tracks going on that, all one way. That was the most I saw on that trail all year, all fall.
The minute we
had snow.
I'm not going to say it was a substantial snowfall, but enough
3 inches.
Enough to kind of...
It was 3 inches. But that just showed me that the minute it does snow, those deer start thinking about the yard.
Yeah.
The minute it does snow. That's the migration trail right there.
Yeah.
And like I say, the minute it snows, they're thinking about it.
And
I heard another guy talk about that on another podcast, either downstate or New Hampshire, Vermont.
Right.
He talked about that, seeing it really early.
You're right. it's a well-established fact that animals... They have learned behaviors like that, and they can become conditioned to to supplemental feeding. It's an easy easy meal for them.
Yeah,
and head right straight to where they're fed.
Yeah,
as opposed to more natural situations where they kind of slowly make their way into a yard.
Yeah, they don't want to really get there until they have to. Exactly,
because they'll end up eating themselves at a house and home.
Yeah,
if they're...
yeah. A good example of that, Paul, is the Brownville food pantry. The deer feeding pantry down in Brownville, and I watched that online, and those deer are there on bare ground.
Which isn't normal.
No. But they know they're going to be fed.
Yep.
And some of those are big bucks that have probably been there for a number of years, and like they're conditioned to that. They know they're going to be fed, and so they're there.
The state Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife has kind of a guidance on if you do decide to feed deer, on how you should go about it. I think ultimately they frown upon it.
They do.
Right? They want things to occur. The deer have been doing this for eons, surviving without supplemental feeding, and they kind of want it to...
Yeah.
For a plethora of reasons, which we'll get into. So they want it to kind of occur naturally.
Right.
And I can understand where people, they want to, especially a harsh winter.
Want to help the deer.
Want to try to help out as much as possible. Unfortunately, sometimes if it's not done correctly, it can cause more harm than good.
Yeah.
One thing that that does kind of set uneasy with me about is changing the deer's behavior, which we see.
Yeah.
You know, as a deer hunter, you don't want to see the deer vacating an area.
Yeah. Before the deer season's over. And we've seen that in years where you get to Thanksgiving week and the area you hunt is void of deer.
Yeah, for no actual reason.
Right.
Right. There's no necessity that they have to go yard up.
Right. At
November, if there's no snow. So you hate to see that happen. That conditioning can be reversed. So if you remove the stimuli, such as feeding, but the problem is there can be some, I guess, casualties with that. There's some fallout from, you know, if you decide the deer are showing up, like say this Brownville food pantry, you got to assume, you know, those deer are honed in to that area.
Oh yeah.
Come wintertime, all of a sudden, if it's not there and you had a scenario where you get a lot of snow and it's probably not good wintering habitat there.
Right.
I don't know what the surrounding areas look like, but that could be a pretty bad
I would suspect, and they mention that as one of the problems with feeding deer is that surrounding area does generally get overbrowsed because you've got a high concentration of deer in one area. So that you're right. Usually the browse, the natural browse in that area is because they're still going to eat it, even with the supplemental food. They're still going to go and feed on the browse around the area, and that can be overbrowsed.
I wonder how many deer visit that.
Yeah, it's. I think it can get up into the hundreds, and I looked it up, and some of the figures they gave, they feed them oats, I believe.
Yeah, that's
about 700 pounds a day. It can get up to.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, it can get up to. I believe they said 700 pounds of oats a day.
700 a day. I know a typical deer can eat 2 to 5 pounds.
Yeah,
a day.
Yeah. And they like I say, and that's another thing, Paul, and you probably read it's very important what you feed a deer during the winter. I mean, they say that corn, a straight diet of corn is not good.
No.
Oats, acorns, are a good supplemental food. And
so I just did the math real quick. So you look at 50-pound bags. Yeah, that's almost $200.
Yeah.
$200 a day. $168.
Yeah, I think they get it bulk from out of Holton.
Oh, really?
They had a truck come down bulk, and they have a silo there, Paul, and it's put in the silo.
Okay.
And then they take it in with the truck and pick up and put it in the hoppers they have. And I think that they feed them apples too. They do feed them apples. They I believe it's something like $9,000 a year that it costs them to, and they're looking for donations to help fund it.
That's a lot of money.
And that's why they put it online so people can watch. And I mean, if you're going to donate to it, you're going to, it's nice to be able to see where your money's going. So
as far as the department's concerned, like we were talking about, they prefer natural methods for.
Yeah.
And I understand that because obviously deer transitions into woody browse. Come winter
That's
time.
Exactly, in the winter.
And their GI tract changes accordingly. Mm-hmm. It's quite similar to us. Our diet really affects how our microbiome and our gut.
Microorganisms in our stomach.
So it would be the bacteria, good bacteria, stuff like that, that's responsible, that aids in digestion.
Yeah.
And what happens with a deer is as that transitions into more woody browse, its gut microbiome changes accordingly to be able to digest that woody browse.
Right.
So let's say if, you allow that deer transitions into, adapts to browsing on woody sticks and whatnot. Right. And then you throw out a bunch of sugary stuff, even corn, on its own, it can actually kill the deer.
Yeah, absolutely. They do not digest it.
No, it's not.
They take they take between 1 and 2 weeks. Some say 1 and 3 weeks for their body to adjust to the food they're eating.
Yeah.
And so if you get too late in the game, if you come in and they're in starvation mode and throw in alfalfa or, like you say, corn or something like that, they can die with a full stomach.
A bunch of sweets and stuff like that.
Exactly. exactly.
It can cause more harm than good.
Yeah, you got to get it on them early before they're really stressed, and so they can acclimate, adapt to it.
Yeah.
So
it's much like us. Like if you see a person that's, used to the standard American diet, eats a bunch of junk, processed food and stuff like that, and that's their mainstay, and then all of a sudden you feed them a diet of vegetables,
salads,
they feel bloated, they feel terrible and it's almost similar, like a couple weeks or maybe a week or so until you really adjust to that high fiber diet as opposed to your simple sugars and all the other junk you've been eating up until that point.
Yeah.
It can be quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so, we experience that to some extent.
Yeah.
So the state's not a big proponent, but they know people are going to do it.
Yeah.
So they do give some guidance on it. So on their website, they've got a good brochure.
Yeah, I read
on how to feed, when to feed, what you should be feeding them, what you shouldn't be feeding them, why you shouldn't be feeding them that. And it breaks it down real good. So I guess personally, if I was going to say, okay, if I'm going to feed deer, or if I was going to feed deer personally, there's probably some things I would consider before I did it. One would be, what's the winter looking like?
Mm-hmm.
If it's a mild winter, I probably would be less prone to doing it.
Right.
Because you got to consider all the things that are going to decrease a deer's survival. So we got wintering habitat or lack thereof, predation, and availability of food and stuff like that. How deep the snowpack is. So that would be one thing that would influence whether I would do it or not. Another thing is location.
Right.
Because you're going to be concentrating deer into an area.
Yeah.
So I think one thing, don't say if someone's going to feed, if they usually have a warden come out or someone within the state and take a look at the area and make sure they're not close to a roadway.
Well, they like to, their recommendation is half a mile from a road, Paul. The problem with that is the people who are going to feed a deer aren't going to do that because it's an inconvenience. They're going to do it where it's convenient for them to do it. And the deer are going to come to them.
Yeah.
I know in the village of Allagash, they've done that. So they do it right in the village, right beside the main road. And I don't know what the figures are now. I know I heard years ago they hit a lot of deer up there.
Did they?
I almost think it could be triple digits into the 100.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. The vehicle deer collisions.
Yeah.
So which you want to be away from a road.
Yeah.
And that's probably first and foremost. And then we talked about you need to feed them the right thing, and you need the way you disperse it, Paul.
Yeah.
It needs to be dispersed. You don't want it all in one spot.
Because when you think of a natural scenario of a deer going to a yard, they slowly make their way into the yard, and then they're spread out amongst that yard, kind of browsing more diversely, which also brings up one thing that I see a lot of, and I got to assume it's the fact that you are basically concentrating deer into, say, troughs or piles of food or whatever, is you see like a more competitive side.
Yeah,
to
and
the
they
deer.
do get competitive with it.
You'll see, there's almost like a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And you'll see like one doe in particular that gets like
very protective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you probably don't see that. I'm making some assumptions here, but I'm thinking you probably don't see that in a yard because
in the
there's
wild.
just kind of browse spread out and about. But I know Ryan was just sending me pictures the other day of some deer. He's not feeding them, but they've got, I think there's some apple trees out in back of the yard. Yeah. And he's like, there's a doe. He's like, she's nasty.
Yeah.
She puts the run to all kinds of different deer there.
Yeah.
And, little ones, they're all kind of concentrated in underneath this tree.
Yeah.
And, she'll put the hooves to them.
Yeah.
Get them out of there. See, I know they generally say once the snowpack's over 12 inches when the deer naturally kind of go to the yards. So I guess if the state recommends you start feeding either late December or when the snowpack is greater than 12 inches, whichever comes first.
Right.
And then as you touched earlier, they also recommend if they're going to have a higher sugar content to the food, because I think some horse feeds and stuff have like molasses mixed in with it that you want to kind of expose them to that earlier
Right.
in December, a couple weeks before.
Right.
So their guts can transition to that
Exactly. Yeah.
higher sugar content. And then, like you said, once you're feeding, you can't stop.
No, you can't stop. Yeah, you can't pull the plug once you start. The deer are really gonna be in trouble.
They
then.
are, especially if February.
Yeah.
February, end of February into March. It's kind of a rough.
Yeah, and so they say, it can get expensive because they're going to come back and they're going to bring their friends with them. There's going to be more deer than,
I heard someone say, like, early in the year when they haven't really been honed into the yards, to say if you had 10 deer coming, you can probably expect to double it. I don't know how accurate that is.
Yeah.
But you can expect double the number once the winter really gets here.
Yeah.
So you mentioned a little while ago, what should you feed the deer? Now, the one thing that their natural woody browse is preferred.
Right, exactly. Maple, and there's certain.
So one recommendation that you see floating around is if you have a wood lot, maybe however your harvest management practices are, do it and set that coincides with the deer wintering.
Absolutely.
You're dropping trees. They've got basically all that canopy.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, Paul, because back in the day when I was young, that happened with forest practice all the time. That was, it created the way they harvested for pulpwood, and they created runways in the woods. Yeah. They were much more selective cut.
Yeah.
They were there for longer periods of time so they could be there all winter.
Yeah.
So the deer would follow the chainsaw into those places. But now the practices are they get in and they get out. So the deer can go into a place that's been cut, and oftentimes it's clear cut, so that's not good. But the deer may go there and they may pull out in a couple of weeks. So it could be the middle of January and the deer are stranded there.
Yeah.
And the feed is gone. They've stopped cutting. And the easy travel in the skid trails is gone.
Yep.
And so cutting practices has had a big effect on the wintering of deer.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it was much more conducive to deer survival, the cutting practices, 50 years ago than it is today.
Because we look at some cuts, like this year, there were some cuts that had tremendous amount of feed in them.
Yeah.
They left all the tops.
They left all
those trees through, and it was terrible to try to walk through the place.
It was a mess.
But man, there's a lot of good feed.
Yeah, and the deer were there.
Yeah.
That's where the deer were.
Yeah. You look at some cuts, there's nothing left.
No. Most of the cuts where we hunt in the serving land, and they when they clear cut, they flatten it, and then they come in and they plant their seedlings, and then they herbicide it, after that, when the seedling release, and there was not much in there for deer. Well, these cuts that we found this year, they were full of feed.
No,
all
phenomenal.
The tops of the trees that they cut were there.
Yeah.
And the deer were loving it.
Yeah.
They were loving it. So
I guess if someone decides to feed, I think what most people use are oats.
Yeah, I know the Brownville pantry. I believe it's oats and apples.
Yeah.
So
I know I can remember. So in Ashland, I work up in Ashland a fair amount, and a lot of deer in town come wintertime.
Yeah,
I can pull into the pharmacy actually right now,
and a lot of people feed them there, or used to anyway.
Oh, they still do.
They do. Yeah,
and right across the parking lot. If we get a little skiff of snow, there are deer tracks all through the parking lot.
Yeah,
and I can remember a few years back we had a pretty rough winter, and we have some cedar trees in around the store, and some of them are right next to the building.
Yeah.
And one day I was standing there and I'm at the bench, and it was in March actually, big snow banks out by the windows, and I look out and I can see the back end of a deer right in the window.
Yeah.
Like 10 feet from the building.
Yeah.
He was climbing up the bank to get to the cedar tree.
Yeah.
To browse on that. Boys, his hips it was a big deer too.
Yeah. The hip bones sticking. Yeah. You can see when they're really stressed physically.
So Doug was up there, I think the next day. He had a saw out in his truck. He goes outside and he cut down all kinds of branches in the afternoon when they were slow.
Yeah.
And the deer cleaned them up in no time.
Yeah.
they were just loving that. But he had kind of had a soft spot there. Just like, man, poor things are climbing the snowbanks out back, trying to feed themselves.
Yeah, it can get tough up here, Paul. We get a lot of snow, and it can get real tough. And then you throw coyotes in the mix, and I don't know how we have any deer left at all.
I know, they're a resilient animal.
Yeah, but they're really, it's really tough in the big woods, and that brings me to a point of, in some ways, I'm for it because of that, because the powers that be have done a really, really, well, I don't want to say a poor job, but they haven't done very well managing the herd up here. Whatever they've done, it hasn't worked.
No.
So,
and there's a lot of people get pretty hot under the collar about a lot of reasons why. Yeah. Whether it's predation or
predation plays a big part.
Wintering habitat. And one thing that they used to have a good coyote snaring program.
Well, that was there again. That's the powers that be that have put an end to that.
Yeah, and
because of the links.
Yeah, which we have all kinds of links now.
Yeah.
No rabbits to speak of. And that always makes me. It always makes me kind of I have a hard time to wrap my mind around, like, especially people that are against hunting.
Right.
The obsession with predators.
Yeah.
Like they want to, I don't know, like whether it's wolves or mountain lions, coyotes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's like the Disney effect or something, or they anthropomorphize these animals. They put their own emotional and the way that they think, and they're making that assumption that an animal thinks the same way.
Yeah.
And they don't at all.
No.
And they hate to see like anything killed. Yeah. But if you look at nature at its like very essence, it's a cruel world. Yeah. It is a wicked, cruel world.
Oh, yeah.
There's seen a deer eaten from the
hind end.
Hind end, well, it's alive.
While it's alive.
I mean, but that's reality.
Yeah. It is reality.
That happens.
Yeah.
And I think with that Brownville feeding station, wasn't there a doe that has some mass or something on her belly?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I haven't seen her the last few times I've watched, but I didn't know whether I thought when I first saw it, I thought that she had maybe ripped her belly and her intestines were coming out.
Okay.
But I have since read that they thought it was a mass, some sort of mass on her. Yeah.
So, they had an excellent snaring program, and now can't do that.
Yeah. And another big thing, and you get into the harvesting, and they went in and they would mark off their yards, and then they would harvest all around it, and they've left an island of trees.
They segmented all the yards.
They fragmented and segmented the forest.
Yeah.
Well, when they were doing that, they really didn't realize the consequences of really what it took to be a deer yard to sustain deer. And after they did that, in a few years, the deer were gone completely from the yard.
Yeah. So they need large continuous tracts of wintering habitat.
They do. And like I say, the fragmentation of that, and they found out in short order that it didn't work.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Sometimes you learn the hard way.
And so, we can look at all these places that historically were yards, and there are no deer in them.
No.
But it's kind of funny. These migration trails go right through there.
Yeah.
They go right through the old yards and stuff, and they're just passing through. They're going miles away to a different yard, probably where somebody's feeding them. So then I'm going, well, these people that are feeding them are probably, they're helping the deer herd more than the powers that be.
Yeah.
Have done. Yet they don't want them to do it, but what alternative have they given us?
Yeah.
What are they doing to help
you're right. It's
They spend a lot of money on
telling us what's wrong.
Telling us what's wrong, exactly. They can study that and tell us, well, you have between 1 and 2 deer per square mile. Okay, that's good. We know we don't have any deer, or that the deer population's low. What can we do? Yeah. And basically they've said, well, we can't grow a forest overnight. That's what they've told us. We can't replace the yards. So, and that's part of the problem, deer yards, but we've also addressed the predation that
coyotes
doesn't seem to, they're not too concerned about that, but that has a huge effect on deer.
Well, and bear too in the springtime.
And bear.
We've got a lot of bear.
Yeah. They have their effect on the spring fawns and stuff. Yeah. But I do have to mention one guy. There is one guy, and he, by him, I don't want to say by himself, but it's kind of been his baby, is Jerry McLaughlin out of New Sweden.
Oh, yeah.
He's probably done more to help deer in Aroostook County than any one person.
He was a heck of a, I remember a lot of coyotes hanging at his place too.
He's a trapper, a guide, and so he's ahead, and I'm not sure if I got the name of this association. I think it's Aroostook County Conservation Association.
Okay.
And he, like I say, that gentleman's probably done more for the deer in Aroostook County than any other person.
Yeah.
And I don't believe he's getting paid anything for it either. So,
I guess a passion.
Passion,
You're talking about people feeding deer, like up in Ashland. There's a lot of people, like you said, that feed deer up in Ashland. And there's a guy, he's passed away now, but he was a pretty diehard deer feeder. And I think at one point he had about 50 deer in his house. And he had an interesting story. He had a doe that was coming, and I think she came 9 consecutive years. And the way he knew, she had a little white, I think diamond on her chest or something. Yeah. She had a white patch anyway on her. And she would come right up on his porch. He would give her an apple every day. Yeah. And he's like, I think every morning she'd come up and be looking in the window on his porch.
Looking for her apple.
Give her an apple. Yeah. But man, once the snow was gone, it was like someone flipped a switch.
Yeah.
She's gone.
Yeah.
And he had 50 deer. He must have spent quite a bit of money.
And he was in a bad spot too. He was on
he was right on a corner there.
He was on a busy road, and there were a lot of deer.
I saw a lot of deer laying in the ditch over the course of the years.
That wasn't a good spot. So
no.
Yeah.
And a lot of turkeys show up at those places.
Yeah,
they
do.
Then you're dealing with turkeys eating your food too. So some of the other issues that come with, when we talked about, concentrating deer in such a small area, is the competitiveness that isn't typically normal, and also disease. It'd be easier to spread disease.
Yeah, CWD or anything. Although
you worry about that.
Yeah, that could happen, and it does. And if you did have a disease or something come in, it would be the chance of spreading it to a large number of deer is far greater when you concentrate them in there. I've never heard of that happening.
No.
Up here.
No.
Not that it can't or won't in the future, but I've never heard of any the deer getting a large number of deer dying from any disease up here.
Yeah.
So, and predation too. They talk about when you concentrate them, it's easier for predators to.
One thing though that I think occurs is because most of these deer now are going into the towns to be fed. Coyotes don't like people.
You're absolutely right.
So it's almost kind of
they're actually protected from predation a lot of times because
It's funny because deer, they don't want to be in someone's backyard ultimately,
right? But
there's almost a risk reward.
They know
there. They're like, okay.
They know it.
I'm safer here from
absolutely
from a coyote.
Yeah,
I'm getting fed.
They're pretty cagey. They have caught on to that there is a measure of protection in the human presence.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen there, Paul, is if there is some predation, people are going to see it, and you're going to see people start setting up bait sites and shooting the coyotes.
Take care of coyotes.
They do it in Ashland. They do it in almost any town. Where if it was 50 miles west of Ashland in a deer yard, Nobody's going out there to shoot predators.
Coyotes.
So,
yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to it.
There is. So I'm like smack dab, probably smack dab in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I like things being done as natural as possible because you never fully know how you are going to influence something negatively, especially downstream, and whether it's the deer's health from what they're being fed or the changes in behavior that it leads to. Because I hate fall time seeing all the deer
headed
vacate the area. They are all headed in one direction.
They are.
If we get a big snow early
in the same places year out, of course, the migration trails and stuff, and
you look at those trails and you're like, my God, it looks like thousands of deer have gone across there.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember one year we went a little further south there where we hunt, and it was amazing how many deer had gone down that trail.
Yeah. And you're like, at some point, there's the last deer that goes by.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
the thing about it was, and I'm not going to say all of them, but almost all of them, they weren't coming back. Not that, they were gone.
The ones you would see going in the opposite direction were usually a buck.
Yeah.
They'd...
Yeah, the bucks would come.
But even in that, if all your does are gone, they're going to pull the bucks right out of there as well.
Yeah.
So that's hard to watch come fall time.
But getting back to you say, so the natural way, but now we touched on that in the historic yards, in the natural yards, there are no deer there. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You're going to pull the plug and stop feeding them and have nothing?
Yeah.
That's where I'm kind of, what's the plan?
I know.
What's the plan here? What can we do?
Yeah.
If you don't want us doing this, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
What do you offer as a plan?
Yeah.
Speaking to the state, the powers that be, what do they have for a plan?
And I think
the only plan I've ever heard them say is, well, it just has to play out naturally.
Yeah.
But it's not playing out very good.
No.
Naturally.
No, it's not.
If you're a deer hunter or if you're a deer.
Nope.
So.
No. And I think they must inherently know that because, they don't outlaw it. And it's almost like they...
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. They know that if it wasn't for that, we're in bad shape. And really if it wasn't for that, we'd probably be in a lot worse shape. So you have to take the losses from the vehicles and stuff. Because you look like we've talked about it before where the deer kill is.
Yeah.
It's around the yards.
Yeah.
But by far. You get into a township where there's now deer yarded in, I don't care whether it's Allagash or Ashland or Fort Fairfield.
Yeah, the highest number of deer.
Or Washburn or whatever. Caribou. That's where the deer are yarded.
Yeah.
They're in the towns and that's where the kill is up and stuff. So when you get out in the bigger woods, there's not much left out there during the winter time.
No, especially when you have early snow, which starts concentrating the deer into the yards. It concentrates all the hunters into the yards as well. Man, I've had some seasons. Oh, I hate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's people everywhere just watching migration trails.
Yeah, I heard stories of people seeing 60 deer on 50 or 60 deer on a trail.
Yeah.
It was crazy, when you get the early snow in the deer yards. So I'm all about trying to find a solution to the.
Yeah.
So,
if we could just grow a forest overnight.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm 65. I don't have 100 years.
No. So. It is funny though. Some of the areas we were into an area that we used to deer hunt. And I can remember as a kid when it was just cut and looking at it now, it's ready to be harvested again.
It is.
And it's like, man, time goes by fast.
It does.
And that was probably 35 years ago or so. I wasn't old enough to hunt, but I can remember driving into this one spot and I think there were clear cuts in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And It's fully grown now.
Yeah.
It's fully grown.
We talking about. I did a little research on.
So you prepared a little bit.
I did read a little bit, Paul. It's the first time that you give me a subject that I did read a little bit on.
Yeah.
I knew, I read a lot anyway, general. And in Canada, they've actually done it. The government's actually fed deer, and they usually don't start until there's a very hard winter.
Okay.
And then they've gone in and they've tried to supplemental feed the deer in Ontario, and they've done it in New Brunswick too.
So do their feeding, do they do only when absolutely necessary?
I believe they do. They don't plan on doing it, but I think when they've had a hard winter up in Western Ontario, or I think they've done it in New Brunswick, and the deer, they know that it's critical.
Yeah. See, that would be my approach.
Yeah.
Like if I was thinking, okay, if I were going to feed deer, what would prompt me to do it?
Right.
And it would start with, okay, severity of winter,
and they have an index for that too, Paul.
Okay.
They have a winter severity index that Maine does and the Canadian provinces do, where they gauge how severe a winter is on snow depth at how long the snow is at a certain depth, and temperature has a part to play in it, as far as stressing deer. And it's just interesting in that regard. When it comes to food or cover, deer will choose the cover over food.
Well, one thing I didn't mention either is a deer's metabolism slows come wintertime.
Exactly, yes.
They don't need to eat as much.
Right.
And they spend like September, October really putting on the pounds to get through those winter months. Yeah. So they don't need to eat as much. Yeah. So, they can weather quite a bit with pretty poor food sources.
Yeah.
Not the best food, but obviously Woody Browse is not the most nutritional.
No, it's low quality food. That's for sure, and it'll get them through when they rely heavily on fat reserve and stuff. So bucks have a hard time during the winter. They
run themselves ragged, and then go into the winter.
They're expending the most energy and stuff. So winters are tough on them.
Which is why a winter like this is fantastic.
Yeah, they've had plenty of time.
They've got through the rut.
Yeah,
and now they've been able to. Yeah, it hasn't been super cold.
Yeah,
there is no snow pack whatsoever.
Mobility. They can go anywhere they want. And they've had long enough now. We're a month and a half, a month past deer season, if you're looking at muzzle loading. So they've had plenty of time to... Yeah.
And if, springtime, we shave a little bit off that'd be even better. But I think right now, it doesn't matter.
No.
How things work out from here.
No.
Should be good. Should see a lot of young bucks next year.
Yeah. Yeah, there should be. Yeah. And the does will produce good. They won't be as stressed when they're dropping their fawns next year, so they'll have pretty good survival for that. Yeah. So anyway, getting back, some of the provinces, like I know Ontario, they do it when it's critical, when they deem it's necessary to go in, and they'll and they try to do it right, and using snowmobiles or whatever to go in that area and spread it out.
Yep.
And put the right feed down in a way that that was another thing they talked about. That stuff can go rancid, the oats and stuff, and it can be toxic to a deer if it gets wet and molds and stuff. It can kill a deer that way. So there's a lot to it.
That was how they discovered a drug, warfarin.
Yeah,
back in the day. All of a sudden, all the cows started hemorrhaging.
Yeah,
having brain hemorrhages and stuff, and they isolated the compound and
wow.
Yeah. They started out using it as rat poison, and then realized that there could be a therapeutic aspect to it. And they discovered it, and those cows were bleeding internally to death.
Yeah. Who'd have thunk?
Yeah, it's great. Hey, that's they say someone who's a genius is able to connect two unrelated events and piece it together and make sense. And that's really connecting the dots to make something beneficial.
Exactly. Yeah.
For society. You'd think, how would something from cow feed that's gone bad turn into a therapeutic compound to save lives. It was pretty cool.
I think the reason they take a dim view because it's there again. We talked about that. It's oftentimes not done the best way. Most of the time, it's too close to a road, and you get a lot of deer car collisions. And stuff.
Well, and plus you get a lot of people they think they're doing good.
Yeah,
and they probably don't do their homework the way they should. So they're just throwing table scraps out there and stuff.
No. You
that's
can't do that.
Not good for the deer, and they don't know. They're thinking they're helping.
Yeah,
and actually they're not.
Yeah. So my take on it would be this: that if it was done in the right way, and maybe if it was done away from, if it wasn't an individual in a house doing it in his backyard, and we did it where there should be deer yarded with some sort of predation control, and you did it the right way, it would probably benefit the deer big time.
So if you did it in an organized manner with a plan.
In an organized manner. In
a calculated way.
Done correctly. Yeah. Whether that could ever happen, I don't know. But I think that if it was done the right way, organized, like you say, and
maybe an established deer yard or previously established deer yard, stuff like that.
Yeah, I often envisioned that, but you'd need some predation control too, and like I say, you'd want to make sure that you would not want to concentrate the deer into one area. You'd want to spread it out and stuff, and I could see that there might be a benefit in that.
Yeah,
I don't know if anybody's doing that right now in the state. I don't know. I don't know if ACCA is doing that or if that's something they do but.
And then it costs money and personnel to implement that stuff.
Yeah. So we don't want the government doing it.
No, it would cost an arm and a leg. Oh. It cost about 10 times the amount of what it should.
Yeah. Like I said, Jerry, he's done more by himself with very little funds, and the guy I give him a lot of credit. He did something.
He did, yeah.
He saw a need and he did something. And rather than sit back and complain, he did something.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting stuff, but so far this year though, things are looking up.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks good this year.
Don't need to feed them too much. And even I was looking at the long-term forecast, there's no
snow in the forecast.
No snow and not really cold. We got a couple days where it's going to get below zero, but even during the day, it's going to be like upper teens.
Yeah, that's not
20s.
Cold for this time of year.
No.
I've seen, I was looking at weather history, and we've gone 67 days in a row below zero.
Yes.
So I don't know if we've seen much below zero this year.
I think that one morning we went out.
Imagine that. And so I heard one person today at church complain about it was cold, and I'm going, man, it was 30 degrees when I get up, the middle of January.
Yeah.
That's not cold.
No.
It, like I say, we've had years, I think the record is 67 days in a row below zero.
Yes.
Now, that doesn't mean it stayed below zero the entire day, but it dropped below zero.
We hit below zero at one point.
Every day for 67 days in a row. Man. In Caribou. That's cold.
Yeah.
That's a cold snap.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen anything even close to that. It's been, when you talk about 5 or 10 degrees at night for middle of January, that's mild.
It is.
That's mild.
I had someone comment on that actually. They said, because I had mentioned when I get up that morning, I live higher elevation, so it was 4 degrees. A little
warmer. Yeah.
And he's like, you mentioned it's 4 degrees so nonchalantly, like it's.
Well, it is.
I'm thinking, kind of. That's what
warm.
we're used to this time of year.
Yeah.
It's not that bad.
That puts it in perspective. That 67-day deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wrap your mind around that if you're from Massachusetts or someplace south of here. 67 days in a row below zero.
I don't want to wrap my mind around it, and I live here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could pay for it.
Yeah,
things.
Yeah, you know what? And I say this all. We're going to have winter. Yeah, it's going to get cold. Yeah. It's going to get below zero. Yeah. But man, if you can, the further you get along, and
I remember
the fewer days you're going to have. So
I remember a few years back, I was covering for somebody at another area. He was going to Florida for the week. It was the end of March, and I'm going into his place to work, and I get up, and he's down in Florida playing golf, and it was minus 27 when I was going. So I took a picture of my thermometer. I'm like, enjoy Florida.
Yeah. Yeah, I took a picture.
End of March, we're minus 27.
I took a picture of a couple of years ago. It was minus 36 at the house. So I took a picture of it. It was in, I believe, January.
Yeah, those are cold days.
And, but the coldest I ever saw was, I think the record was 50 below.
Yeah.
It was at a little block checkpoint there. They had a weather station out there.
Was that 07?
Pardon me?
Was that 2007?
It was like 8 or 9, I think, Paul.
8?
I think it was the year after we had the 200 inches of snow, which was a record in Caribou.
Okay.
197 inches is the record in Caribou, and I think it was 2007, 2008, and then the next year we had a lot of cold weather.
Yeah.
2 really bad winters in a row. And it was so cold that I remember it so well. My neighbor had a new vehicle and it wouldn't start. I had jumper cables. I went over, and the first thing I did, and my truck was fairly new, it was a 2008.
Okay.
My Chevy pickup, silver one. I pulled this lever inside to pop open the hood and broke that. Broke the lever.
Jeez.
The cable going to the hood. Broke that. Got my hood open. I took those jumper cables, which were in the back of the truck, and they're rubber. It was so cold they just all broke.
Snapped?
They just all broke. The rubber was so cold that it was so brittle that it just broke.
Things don't work right at minus 50.
At minus 40 or 50, and that's what it was between. It broke my thermometer. Yeah, I had an LL Bean thermometer that went on the outside of the window, and it dropped so low into the bulb when it started coming up, there was air bubbles.
No kidding.
Broke my thermometer. And I talked to a number of people that happened to them. Yeah. Their thermometer didn't work after that. So, yeah.
Makes you wonder how deer survive. You look at their little legs.
Anything.
You're like, how the heck is
how does that not freeze them solid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any animal, birds or whatever. But they do. They survive. Yeah. But they use a lot of energy. That's when their bodies get stressed. Yeah. Anytime below 0, they really dip into their fat reserve. They're burning fat, they say, at below 0. So
minus 50 makes you want to live here.
Yeah. Welcome to Maine. Welcome to Aroostook County.
All righty.
So enough of the good news.
Yeah. So I guess a couple future podcasts, we'll have some guests on.
Yeah.
I think some pretty interesting guests.
Yeah.
One agreed to do it, huh?
Yeah, I got
You were mentioning he's got some Pope and Young.
Yeah,
bear?
I got a really interesting a guy I know. I'm going to call him a friend. He's a bow hunter. He hunts with
longbow, right?
Yeah, I think he hunts with a recurve.
Okay.
Traditional anyway.
Yeah.
He's a traditional archer, and he's in his 60s, so he's done it a long time, so he's got a lot of history and interesting stories about. He's not only a hunter, but he's a competitive shooter. So he's a very interesting gentleman.
Must be a pretty good shot.
It'll be really interesting to have him on the podcast. Yeah. So
yeah, that'll be interesting.
Hopefully that works out.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
no pressure.
Yeah,
and hopefully we get out ice fishing here sometime.
Yeah. Same guy. I talked to him and told him you're working next weekend.
Yes, I work this
and then the next 2 weekends you have off?
I have off, yeah.
So, yeah, I gave him that schedule.
Should have enough ice by then.
That's what he was saying. By that time, we should have good ice. So, maybe we can get out.
Should be easy getting out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Although, like I say, up country, they had all snow yesterday. Yeah. They got 8 inches of snow up there where we got nothing here.
Yeah, we get a little bit of snow, and then it all.
But then it rains. Now it's all a big mess.
Just like and the 50-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah,
jeez.
Yeah.
It gets old.
Snow, heavy rain, and wind.
Yeah,
has been every storm this year.
Yeah. There, does that pretty much cover this one?
Yeah.
So I guess to summarize, if you're interested in feeding deer, look at the department's website.
Yeah.
They got a good brochure on there and
yeah,
what to do, what not to do.
Yeah.
When and how. Just to make sure you do it right.
Right.
You don't cause more harm.
Do it the best way you can.
Yep.
What's best for the deer.
Yep.
So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I guess until next time, get outside.
It's good for the soul.
See ya.